After being reborn, I decided not to trade my career for Henry's life again. In his final moments, he lay on the hospital bed, dreaming. His eyes filled with tears as he murmured, "Susan, why didn't you save me this time?" In the previous life, I loved Henry so deeply I was willing to give up everything. When he had a life-threatening accident and needed surgery, I didn't hesitate to use an unapproved drug to save him. But once he recovered, Victoria reported me to the authorities, and the signature on the witness statement was Henry's. I got fired, lost my medical license, and could never practice again. Victoria took my place and became the chief physician. Henry told me, "Susan, this opportunity is crucial for Victoria. She has nothing, while you still have me and Jack even if you can't be a doctor anymore." So, I devoted myself to being a full-time mom. But my dedication quietly changed in their eyes. Henry always used work as an excuse to spend time with Victoria. New colleagues at the hospital assumed they were a couple, praising how perfect they looked together. Even on my birthday, our son would hold Victoria's hand, saying, "Aunt Victoria, I wish you were my mom. You're nicer and have a better job than my mom." Not wanting to hear more, I asked Henry for a divorce. I went alone to the beach to unwind and met a child swept into the sea by waves. I saved her, but I stayed in the ocean forever. When I opened my eyes again, it was a month before Henry's accident. A colleague found me, admiringly saying, "Susan, the leaders decided in the meeting that you'll represent our hospital for the training next month. If nothing goes wrong, you'll be the chief physician when you're back." I smiled and nodded my thanks. In the previous life, I got the same opportunity but rushed back to perform surgery on Henry after hearing about his accident just an hour before leaving. Victoria volunteered to take my place for the training. Later, I learned that Henry's accident happened because he was buying a favorite cake for Victoria's birthday, crashing into a pier on his way back. I put away my phone and went to the office balcony. Looking down, I saw Henry, who claimed exhaustion from 3 surgeries, taking pictures of Victoria under the cherry blossom tree. "Henry, how is it? Do they look good?" Victoria asked, her cheeks blushing, gazing at him with anticipation. "They look great. You always look good in photos," he replied. I tried to remember if he ever took a picture like that of me in our 7 years of marriage. It didn't seem like it, but it didn't matter now. "Henry." I called down to him. Our eyes met, and for a moment, he looked embarrassed. "Since you have the time to help someone with photos, I guess you're not as tired as you said. You should attend Jack's parent-teacher conference this afternoon." He frowned slightly, opening his mouth to say something, but Victoria jumped in, "Susan, don't misunderstand. I just thought the cherry blossoms were pretty and asked Henry to take a picture. It's really just that. Haven't you known Henry long enough to trust his character?" Victoria always knew how to clear herself of suspicion, even turning the tables. The old me would feel I'd overreacted and apologize. My constant backing down made everyone see me as insignificant, walking all over me. But not anymore. I smiled and said, "I'm only asking him to attend Jack's parent-teacher conference. As a father, shouldn't he?" I caught a glimpse of Henry's surprised yet inquisitive gaze. The old me took care of everything, letting him live 8 easy years. This shift must surprise him. But I ignored it, returned to the office, and closed the balcony door. Soon, there was a knock at my office door. I got up to open it. Henry stood there with a dessert. "Some interns gave me a treat. I brought you a small cake." I watched him for a while. He seemed puzzled, touching his face. "What? Is there something on my face?" "Henry, don't you know I'm allergic to cream?" I said. He froze, the hand holding the cake at a loss. I let out a small, wry smile. "You can have it back." How could he know? He just didn't care. All these years, he hardly celebrated my birthdays. When his and Jack's birthdays came around, he'd feel a bit guilty and then say he forgot about mine, only to repeat the same the next year. I once told myself not to mind these minor issues. He was just careless. Marriage was all about mutual tolerance. But knowing how he would make efforts for Victoria's birthday, I realized how foolish my thoughts were. As I was about to close the door, he stopped it, looking apologetic after a pause. "Susan, I'm sorry." I smiled. "It's all right, it's not like I met you yesterday." Relieved, he sighed. Then he invited me, after Jack's conference, I'll take him to my mom's. "Let's have dinner out, just the two of us." It's been a while. It really had been a while. After work, my priority used to be groceries and cooking, even though Henry and I both worked at the hospital. Because I liked him, I thought I could go the extra mile for him. I don't want to do that anymore. Okay, I agreed, thinking it was a good time to tell him about the divorce. He happily left. Later that evening, he texted me saying he was parked out front. I changed clothes and headed out. Through the crowd, I saw Victoria standing in front of him from a distance. She looked upset, saying something to him. As she spoke, tears started to fall. Henry lifted a hand, patting her shoulder. The next second, Victoria leaned into his arms. In a flash, my eyes met Victoria's. She hastily jumped out of Henry's embrace, waving at me, flustered. "Susan, don't get the wrong idea." But that fleeting smugness in her eyes didn't escape me. "Susan," Henry said to me, "Victoria's cat is sick. I need to go with her to the pet hospital. Can we reschedule dinner for another day?" Before I could respond, Victoria sniffled and said, "Henry, no need, you should go have dinner with Susan. I'll be fine on my own. I don't want Susan to be upset because of me." What a piece of work. Henry looked at her, torn. "But are you sure you can manage by yourself?" "Henry, since Victoria said she's fine on her own, let's just go eat." With that, not only did I get a surprised look from Henry, but also disbelief from Victoria. Because the old me would have quietly put up with it. Victoria counted on me to react that way when she said those pretentious things. Ignoring their stares, I opened the passenger door and got in. Henry stood there, still stunned. I rolled down the window and looked at him. "What's the holdup? You coming or not?" When Henry drove off, I saw Victoria through the rear view mirror, her face sullen, a stark contrast to her usual cheery self. As we drove onto the highway, neither Henry nor I spoke a word. I could see he was distracted, clearly preoccupied. After 10 minutes, rain started pouring down, and Henry's phone rang. Victoria's name flashed repeatedly on the screen. He glanced at me. I turned my head away. He answered the call, and Victoria's anxious voice came through. "Henry, what should I do?" She began to cry. "Victoria, don't panic. Just tell me what's wrong. The doctor said earlier that Mimi is in a coma and won't wake up. It's really serious. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do by myself," she sobbed. "Can you come with me? I'm really scared." Henry didn't say anything, just shifted his gaze to me. "If I said you couldn't go, would you actually not go?" I asked softly. A girl's pitiful cries echoed from the phone. He said, "I'm sorry, Susan." He dropped me off beneath the overpass, even though it was pouring rain outside. He left so quickly he didn't have time to hear what I had to say and soon disappeared into the night. I watched the neon-lit cars flow by, pulling a forced smile in the direction he left. "Henry, I gave you a chance." I took a cab back home. Jack was at his grandmother's place, so no one was home. I took out a suitcase and started packing my things. While packing, I was surprised by how little of this house was actually mine. Erasing my presence here was ridiculously easy. I used to prioritize them in everything, neglecting myself greatly. In this home, I always put myself last. On the vanity, a necklace caught my eye. It was the first gift Henry gave me when we started dating, and probably the only one. I cherished it so much that I never even wore it. I kept it stored away, occasionally taking it out to look at it before bed and then putting it back. He'd sometimes tease me, saying I was making too big a deal out of it. But now, this necklace was nothing but a joke to me. I looked at it one last time in my hand before tossing it in the trash without a second thought. As I was about to leave, I felt the ring on my finger. It was our wedding ring. I took it off and left it, along with the divorce papers, on the living room coffee table. I moved into the hospital dormitory. At 10 p.m., Henry called me multiple times. Seems he'd found the divorce papers. I didn't answer, just turned off my phone. Around midnight, someone knocked on the dormitory door, the knocking urgent. I opened it to find Henry standing there, looking a mess. His hair was windswept, and his jacket bore signs of being rained on. Seeing me, he leaned on the door frame, clearly relieved. "Susan, what's wrong? Come on, stop messing around, just come home with me." He reached out to grab my hand. I pulled away forcefully. "Henry, stop playing dumb." His expression stiffened, he was silent for a moment. "I've already signed the divorce agreement. Just sign it, and we can get it done next week." "Susan, are you mad at me?" he asked cautiously. "You've always known I only see Victoria as a sister. She's had a tough life, losing her parents early, going to university, becoming a doctor. It hasn't been easy for her. I just want to help her where I can. Please, don't overthink things, okay? I've never done anything to betray you." I glanced at him. "Henry, do I have to catch you in bed with someone to prove you cheated? As my husband, you constantly leave me to help another woman. You can't remember my birthday, but you remember every important date related to her. You never cared about what I like, you don't even know I'm allergic to cream. But you remember she doesn't like cilantro in hot pot dipping sauce. Do you really think that doesn't count as cheating?" "Henry." Victoria showed up in the hallway. "Susan, are you and Henry fighting? Is it because of me?" she asked, looking innocent. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Susan, don't misunderstand Henry. It's me." She suddenly started bowing and apologizing. "Don't let your relationship be harmed because of me. Henry and I really have nothing between us." I wasn't interested in her act, so I turned around, ready to shut the door. Henry, quick on his feet, held his ground and spoke with a shaky voice. "Susan, don't worry, I'll sort everything out and give you an explanation." When he finished, I caught Victoria's face change behind him. I closed the door and didn't bother anymore. In the past, I gave up my future for him and Victoria, only to end up in a miserable state. This time around, I just want to cut ties with him and live my life. The next day at work, I hadn't even reached the office when I saw Henry waiting with breakfast at the door. He lit up when he saw me, and ran over. "I went to that breakfast spot near our college and got your favorite dittams." My side eye caught the familiar name of the place on the bag, 20 kilometers away from our home. Yet, I felt no warmth, just an odd sense of humor. I pushed away his hand. "No thanks, I've already eaten. Also, Henry, don't forget, no matter what you do, I'm firm on getting a divorce." His smile froze awkwardly. Standing there, co-workers greeted him, and he nodded like he was in a daze. "Susan." He called as I was about to leave. "Today's Jack's birthday." Oh right, that did jog my memory. I'd actually forgotten about Jack's birthday. "Mom made dinner, we can go over after work to celebrate," he said with a hopeful look. In this life, I hadn't seen Jack yet. In the last one, I left my job to take care of him full-time, revolving my world around him. Yet, in his eyes, I was jobless and too strict, failing to meet his idea of a good mom. This time, I'm giving him a choice. "Okay," I agreed. He beamed at my confirmation. "I'll pick you up after work." With that, he stuffed the breakfast into my hands and dashed off. I glanced at the now cold dittams and tossed it into a nearby trash can. After work, he surprisingly showed up on time, holding a grapefruit tea in hand, the kind I used to love during our dating days. "Got this especially for you," he offered. A nearby nurse teased, "Dr. Henry, you treat Susan so well." This place's tea takes forever to get. Thanks, but I don't like it anymore. Henry looked taken aback. I still took it and handed it to the nurse. Want it? Here you go. She accepted it with delight. Well, thank you, Susan. She chirped before trotting away happily. Henry opened his mouth but decided against saying anything. I moved ahead, glanced back, and said, "Aren't we going to Jack's birthday?" He snapped out of it and caught up. In the car, he tried hard to make conversation, even throwing in a few bad jokes now and then. I just rested my head against the window, staying quiet. Eventually, the awkward vibe made him quiet too. After a half-hour drive, we reached his parents' apartment. I followed him into the elevator, and even before stepping out, I heard Jack's laughter echoing. In the living room, Jack was thrilled, playing with a new toy. His grandma emerged from the kitchen with crabs, with Victoria trailing behind, helping out. Jack, do you like the gift Aunt Victoria brought you from abroad? She even got you chocolates for later. Jack eagerly nodded, I love it. Aunt Victoria, you're the best. I really wanted chocolate, but Mom always says no. While answering, he snuggled up to Victoria. Victoria, you're so thoughtful, Henry's mother praised, unable to hide her approval. Unlike Susan, who's so uptight, always saying no to this and that. Poor Jack. I always said no to chocolate because Jack's allergic to cocoa. He once snuck a piece and was sick all night. Watching silently from the doorway, Henry coughed, then announced, Jack, your mom and I are here. Jack glanced our way reluctantly before hiding behind his grandmother. I entered, looked at Victoria, about to say something when Henry rushed to explain, I didn't invite Victoria. She's my goddaughter now, and I thought it was okay. Henry's mother chimed in, goddaughter? Yeah, I really like Victoria. If only Henry weren't married. M.O.M. Henry cut her off firmly. It's Jack's birthday, can we not talk like that? Reluctantly, Henry's mom fell silent. Susan, don't be upset. The auntie and I get along well, and I lost my parents young, so I cherish family. I'm no threat to you. Victoria added timidly, if it bothers you, I won't come around. Oh Victoria, ignore her. I want you here, Henry's mom interjected. Let's eat. Time for dinner, Henry hurriedly changed the subject, trying to steer away from further tension. He pushed Henry's mom to the kitchen to get the leftovers, and Victoria followed them in. For a moment, it was just me and Jack in the dining room. But he was so caught up with his new toy that he totally ignored me. Jack, I called out. He looked up, not happy that I interrupted him. Come here. I want to talk to you. He slowly got up and sat a seat away from me. I have a question for you. If Mom and Dad get divorced, would you want to live with me? He stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed. I was stunned. I imagined a lot of reactions, but not this. No way. I don't want to live with you. If you and Dad get divorced, no one would be always watching me anymore. Then can Dad marry Aunt Victoria? If Aunt Victoria becomes my mom, that would be great. I dream of her being my mom. Well, there goes my last bit of hope. Just like last time, he's all about Aunt Victoria. Fine, I respect his choice. Henry came out with the dishes. He sat next to me naturally. I saw Victoria's face change, then she casually sat on his other side. He put a piece of braised pork in my bowl. Susan, eat more. Not just Victoria, even Henry's mom was surprised. Because he used to only do this kind of thing with her. The meal had everyone deep in their own thoughts. As it was ending, I decided to tell them about the divorce since everyone was here. I put down my chopsticks. Mom, Henry, and I have something to tell you. Seeing my serious face, Henry suddenly paused and looked uneasy. Henry and I are preparing to div. Susan, I'll get you some soup. He jumped up abruptly and interrupted loudly. I glanced at him but didn't plan to drop it. We're planning to divorce. Susan, this is the chicken soup Mom made all afternoon. You have to drink some. It was as if he hadn't heard what I just said, turning to get me some soup. I stayed silent, got up, and started to leave. He grabbed my arm, almost begging, Susan, I don't agree to the divorce. Next to us, Henry's mom snapped out of her shock and jumped up. Henry, divorce her. Who does she think she is? Once you're divorced, I bet no one would want a second-hand woman like her. That way, Victoria can rightfully become my daughter-in-law, and I'd be thrilled. Victoria stood next to her, her eyes couldn't hide the delight from hearing this. Well then, let me congratulate them in advance on their lasting happiness. I brushed off Henry's hand and replied to his mom. Then I looked at Jack, who was still eating. Jack, you take good care of yourself with your dad and grandma from now on. Mom. Stop talking nonsense. Henry shouted. I took the chance to open the door and got into the elevator. I didn't expect him to run after me. Susan. I didn't look back, and suddenly a scream came from upstairs. Then Henry's mom's shrill voice rang out. Henry, come back. Victoria fell. Henry stopped. I turned to him. He lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. Henry, don't lie to me, or yourself. You can't ignore Victoria. Susan, no. Trust me, I'll sort it all out. Just give me 3 days, and I'll come back with an answer that makes you happy, he said and turned away. I watched him walk away again, a bit helpless. How many times has it been in these 7 years? How many times has he left me a view of his back because of Victoria? Henry, I'm not changing my mind. For those 3 days, I heard neither Henry nor Victoria went to work. 3 days later, Henry showed up at my dorm door. He looked worn out, unkempt with dark circles under his eyes. He handed me a document. I took and opened it. It was the divorce agreement I'd given him, the last page already signed. I raised an eyebrow, put it away, and was about to close the door when he called out. Susan. The last few days, Victoria was in the hospital. So, No need to explain to me, I said as I waved the divorce papers. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Whether you're with Victoria or someone else, you don't need to report to me. Victoria attempted suicide. I wasn't surprised by the news. I asked him, oh? Is she finally done pretending? He dropped his head, not looking at me again. With a bang, I shut the door. He was left outside, and I heard a faint apology. Susan, I'm sorry. I looked at the divorce papers signed, feeling a sense of relief. Finally, I've pulled myself out of this mess. Henry, let's hope for your upcoming surgery after that car accident, Victoria can give it her all to save you. I'm done with this chaos. A week later, Victoria returned to the hospital looking all rosy-cheeked. Nobody could tell from her full-of-life look that she had supposedly attempted suicide and nearly ended up in the ICU. She came back flaunting a huge diamond ring. During lunch in the cafeteria, she deliberately sat in the seat behind me with her friends. She raised her voice, making sure I wouldn't miss a word. Victoria, that diamond ring is stunning. Henry really went all out for you. Oh, this little expense is nothing to him. He also got me several rare leather bags. He said, as long as I like it, it's no big deal. Henry must really love you. You're really lucky. Henry's like the dream guy for so many female doctors and nurses at our hospital. Who would have thought he'd get a divorce and you'd snag him right away? The girl next to her complimented. Another girl quickly chimed in, Victoria, when are you and Henry getting married? We're thinking next month. My mom checked the dates, and there are some good ones for weddings. Oh wow, you're already calling her mom? Victoria shyly smiled and fidgeted. She really likes me, so since Henry and I are definitely getting married, she wants me to call her mom. Oh, And this jade bracelet I'm wearing was a gift from her. She said it's for the daughter-in-law. Wow, that's so lucky. Henry's great in every way, except for being divorced and having a kid. Otherwise, he'd be perfect. Not at all. I love kids. Jack and I get along so well. He often tells me I'm nicer to him than his own mom. He keeps telling me I'm his favorite and wishes I could be his mom in his dreams. Plus, on the day I got discharged, he actually called me mom. After saying that, there was a sudden gasp. She turned around, covering her mouth in surprise. Oh, Susan, you're here too. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't trying to show off. I just feel kind of happy and wanted to share it. Hope I didn't upset you. I smiled, placing the chopsticks in the bowl, and leaned in close to her ear. How could I be? Someone picked up the trash I didn't want. I'm happy for you. It's like recycling waste, isn't it? Susan, you. Her face changed instantly, and she stood up angrily. Don't get mad. Everyone knows how much you liked Henry. Now he doesn't want you and is marrying me. You're just going crazy with jealousy. This is the first time I've seen her so mad. I smiled, patting her on the shoulder. Victoria, try to keep it together a bit longer. Don't reveal your true self to Henry before the wedding. You don't want to ruin the pure image he has of you, right? It could be quite the regret. Don't worry, I heard everything you wanted me to, loud and clear. I wish you both all the happiness. Stick together through thick and thin. Just make sure no one else gets dragged into your mess. That's the biggest contribution to society you two can make. I picked up my tray, ready to leave. But unexpectedly, Victoria stretched her leg out, tripping me. I shifted the position of the tray, and as I fell, everything landed right on her face. With her scream, I saw Victoria with leftovers and egg drop soup dripping from her hair and face. Just as I was about to get up, a pair of hands lifted me. I turned to meet Henry's worried eyes. Susan, are you okay? I immediately stood straight, putting some distance between us. A flash of hurt crossed his eyes. Henry, Victoria called out pitifully from where she stood. Susan splashed me on purpose. I looked at my scraped hand, then up at the security camera on the ceiling. Who did what on purpose? The camera will show. She immediately went silent. Victoria, with so many people here today, let me make this clear. I have zero interest in you and Henry's future. As long as you don't bother me, we can still work together peacefully. But if you push me, I'll expose everything about you and Henry. With that, I walked out without looking back. I could hear Victoria whining behind me. A week later, the day finally arrived. A colleague sent me the flight details, and I packed my bags to catch a cab to the airport. Just as I stepped out, a familiar car pulled up at the gate. Henry was standing by the car, on the phone. Okay, I'll get that cake you like later, alright? My heart sank. No surprise, that call was probably from Victoria. In this lifetime, she's the one asking him to buy the cake. Seeing me, he walked over. Heading out for a business trip? Yeah. How long? 2 or 3 months. Should I give you a lift? I gave him a quizzical look, moved a bit further away, and shook my head. No need. He awkwardly pulled his hand back. Susan, can we still be friends? Just then, my cab pulled up. I got in. Before leaving, I rolled down the window to say one last thing. Henry, sometimes fate is in your hands. Take care of yourself. With a confused look in his eyes, I rolled the window back up and drove away. In the airport, my workgroup chat blew up with messages. Henry's been in a car accident near the hospital. The ambulance is on its way there now. Seeing that, I exited the chat, switched my phone to airplane mode, and boarded the plane. 3 hours later, when we landed, I turned my phone back on. The group chat was blowing up with updates. Victoria performed the surgery on Henry herself. Henry's in a critical condition. It's over, Victoria had a medical mistake. Scrolling through, I pieced together the whole story. On the way to celebrate Victoria's birthday, Henry had a car accident. Victoria operated on her fiancé, but there was an infection during the surgery, and Henry didn't make it. When Henry's mom arrived at the hospital, she was devastated and threw a fit. She demanded Victoria pay with her life for her sons. The hospital's in chaos now. Victoria was temporarily taken away for investigation. A nurse said Henry woke up 10 minutes before he passed. He cried, seemed like he was apologizing to Susan, asking why no one was saving him. Henry passed away. Victoria is being investigated, currently suspended. Henry's mom despises her, demanding compensation daily. In the end, Victoria sold her house and gave away all her savings to Henry's mom. But she wasn't satisfied. She kept causing scenes at the hospital. Eventually, they had no choice but to fire Victoria. Now she has no job. Jack was sent to a boarding school by Henry's mom. By the time I finished my training, all this had ended more than a month ago. I got promoted as expected and finally became the chief physician. 3 years later, I was heading to the supermarket after work to pick up some stuff. Just as I stepped out of my neighborhood, someone bumped into me, and my phone dropped, shattering the screen. He covered his face, ready to run, but I quickly grabbed him. When he turned around, I gasped. It was Jack. Jack had lost a lot of weight, and the mischievous look in his eyes had faded quite a bit. When he heard me call his name, he couldn't hold back and rushed into my arms, sobbing. "Mom." He whimpered, "Mom, I'm sorry, I know I was wrong. I missed you so much." Just then, a little girl ran up from behind me. "Mom, you forgot your keys." Jack froze for a moment. I turned back, held the girl's hand, and introduced her. Her name is Lily. The girl was the child I had saved from the sea in my past life. In this life, I found the day of the accident, went to the beach, and brought her to a safe area before the waves hit. Later, she told me she was trying to catch fish at the beach to make some fish soup for her grandma. She had no parents and only remembered living with her grandma, who picked trash for a living. Her grandma got sick, so she wanted to find something to help her recover. I left her my number back then and told her she could contact me if she ever had trouble. I got her call the day her grandma died. I helped her handle the funeral arrangements. Before leaving, I looked at her wise beyond her years and had an idea. I crouched down and asked, "Lily, would you like to be my daughter?" I adopted Lily. She's very sweet and well-behaved. Jack hesitantly asked, "Did she just call you Mom?" When I opened my eyes again, I was a month before Henry's accident. As a kid, it's hard to hide disappointment. He lowered his head, turned away with his backpack, and started to walk away. Just before he disappeared from my sight, I called out to him. "Jack." He turned around, surprised and happy. "If things aren't great with Grandma, can you come back?" I started. He interrupted, smiling at me, "No, Grandma treats me well, Mom. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Back then, I didn't understand. After saying that, he quickly ran onto the bus. A wave of bitterness welled up in my throat. Maybe this time, he really felt sorry. Later, I heard Victoria found a new boyfriend and even got engaged. On the wedding day, though, Henry's mom showed up with a bunch of people and trashed the place. She spilled all the details of Victoria's past marriage to her son at the wedding. Victoria's fiancé called off the wedding. Before leaving, Henry's mom told Victoria, warning her never to think about remarrying. As long as she was alive, Victoria wouldn't have an easy life. But all that has nothing to do with me now.